Welcome back. So today we're going to do a real quick kind of overview on my thoughts on Blessing 3 versus Dusk. So first I want to thank Apos Audio for letting me borrow the Blessing 3. It's kind of been on my mind since Dusk was released, and I had Dusk, but I never really had a chance to listen to Blessing 3. And, on paper, the two are supposed to be super close, and you can EQ one to another. But when you go back and listen to the original impressions on Blessing 3 and a lot of the disappointment with Blessing 3, yeah, all that stuff was pretty much fixed and addressed in Dusk. So no, I think in general, anyone who sort of tells you that B3 and Dusk are very similar is wrong, in my opinion. The two are very apart in bass and treble quality, and that's sort of what hits you immediately right away. Can you just EQ B3 to Dusk? And I will say that I tried numerous times to get even remotely close, and the answer is no. The dynamic driver on Blessing 3 and possibly on paper, it is the same one on Dusk. Do I believe that? No, I don't believe it at all. There's something different. There's something very different between the two in the way Dusk responds and the fullness that you get on Dusk that is totally missing on Blessing 3. And again, go back and read the initial impressions on Blessing 3. The dynamic driver was, not tuned well, or there's something else going on with it, but it's actually quite different. So regardless of matching the frequency responses, you can see the frequency responses, and mine probably are closer than most people. I mean, when I look at them, there's not that much of difference on the frequency response at all, but in ear, they are very two different sets. So I will say to get Blessing 3 anywhere near kind of as natural and as full sounding as Dusk, that is super hard to do in EQ, and I couldn't quite get there. So the closest I did get to it, because I happen to have the new IFI Zen Can 3, which has a Class A amplifier, it has X-Bass, has X-Bass, that gets you sort of at least in the same game as Dusk. At least it makes this one sound a lot better. But you still need EQ, and I will still say that X-Bass, the Blessing 3 stage is really broken. It's kind of horribly broken, and I couldn't even figure out how an EQ to improve it. Really, really bad. So X-Bass actually does that for you, and that gets you at least treble-wise in the same ballpark. X-Bass gets you, a little bit towards Dusk, and then you still need EQ to kind of get you closer to Dusk on bass response. But yeah, the two aren't really close, and there's no real easy path to get from one to the other one. So aren't the dynamic drivers the same between the two? And I'll say maybe they are, but they don't really respond to it in the same way. With Blessing 3, you're really hit with that weak, thin bass. Again, that was the initial impressions on the initial reviews of Blessing 3. The bass is actually really quite weak on this one. And if you boost that level in EQ, it just doesn't really quite get there. On Dusk, the bass was just a little bit lower. You can kind of hear that there was goodness there, but it was just a little bit low for my preferences. And if you just boost it just slightly, it would make a huge difference. And it sounded great. It was one of my favorite parts of Dusk, and it still is one of my favorite parts of Dusk. And trying to reproduce it was sort of like, it's the same dynamic driver. You should be able to get kind of close to it, but you don't. The two are very far apart in that respect. So Dusk swapped the balanced armature for the microplanar and Dusk. That really shouldn't make that much of a difference. But I will say Dusk is treble. The Dusk on treble is in a very different game than what it is on Blessing 3. Not even close. And, assuming you aren't using the DSP cable, which will actually close the gap on these two, and it makes both of them sound worse. If you actually just use the analog cable and hear Dusk at its full potential and sort of the full potential of Blessing 3, the two are not even close. There was a slight imbalance in the lower to upper with Dusk, right? You can hear greatness there, but the balance of it was just a little bit lower heavy, kind of right there in the vocals. But you can hear through extension, and it went all the way to the end. And it was just high resolution quality way out there through extension. It was very noticeable that the treble on Dusk was much improved. And on Blessing 3, it's just thin, very lower heavy, not balanced. It sounds very flat. There's a very small stage, and it's really hard to hear any extension because of the tuning. And I would say it's not even remotely close to Dusk. And you can poke at it with EQ, but these drivers are not even close to what they are, how they sound in Dusk. So generally, I will say that B3 doesn't really sound as natural out of the box. I think that's what a lot of the most impressions were when it came out. I totally agree. It's actually a very hard set to listen to out of the box. It definitely needs EQ, just the way this one needs EQ, but this one is much farther from a natural sounding, top of the line sounding set. And so I'll say EQ will at least get you closer to natural on B3, but it's not going to get you close to Dusk. That's kind of a bridge too far. So that's what I got. I mean, I do appreciate Apos for letting me borrow it. Not going to sit through and do a full review on. It's a quite difficult set to listen to for any length of time without EQ or without using Zencan like I've been using lately. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.